Hello, my name is Craig Bowden. Dr. Wright has asked me to share a little bit about my experience in EDL 640. Um, I was sitting where you are now. We actually had a physical classroom to attend, but I was taking EDL 640 just a little under a year ago. And Dr. Wright has asked me to kind of share a little bit about my experience and to touch upon some of the topics in Khalifa's book, Culturally Responsive School Leadership, with chapters 3 and 4. So, cover the agenda real quick. Introduction, myself, background of me, and the transformation I went through. And then we're going to cover some of the topics in chapter 3 and 4. And hopefully, I hope Dr. Wright opens this up for discussion, because one of the things I value the most from his class were our lively discussions that we had in the evenings. And sometimes they were heated, sometimes they were humorous, but they were always very heavy and quite deep. But that really enabled us to look at not only ourselves but at each other and our practices to make changes. So, like I said, in introduction, I'm Craig. I graduated this December from the Educational Leadership Program, and I currently work as an assistant principal at E3 Civic High. My roles include discipline and attendance, among other things, but because of my roles of discipline and attendance, this work that was done in this class were incredibly relevant and valuable to me, very practical in terms of what I learned and then what I could bring back to the school I worked at. So my background, as you can see, I'm a white male. I was born with more privilege than I even knew. It was only about 5 years ago when I came into the world of education that I learned the difference between equity and equality. And then I can share that it was only last year going through this course that I really did some deeper work, looking at myself, being critically self-reflective, to see about changing my own view, putting on a different lens to be able to make schools equitable for all. And it's with this book, Khalifa's book, that was really like a guiding document about how to go about that. So I hope you enjoy the journey as much as I did. And now we'll kind of jump into some of the topics covered. So first and foremost, the central premise to this book, as you guys have probably discovered in chapter 1 and 2, is that schools automatically reproduce systems of privilege or oppression even without intentional effort or thought. And this statement is valuable to me because it's not something I would have ever have considered. I was raised to view everybody equally, and I was raised to believe in meritocracy. If you work hard, good things happen. What I wasn't raised to understand was that there are systems of privilege in this country, and that as a white man, if success in this country is defined by a 100-yard race, my starting line is probably at the 90-yard line. A white female, maybe her starting line is at the 50-yard line. Now, people of color, they might be at that 100, the starting line for the whole 100-yard dash, if they were invited because they value white culture. I guess that's a way I can view things now to understand the systems of privilege. And then with that view and understanding, I can see that the systems that are in place were produced by white people, by white men. 85% of our teachers in this country are white. And so by blindly going into these things, what we're doing is automatically reproducing systems of privilege or oppression. So every discussion, I think, really needs to begin with how our country began. And one of the defining things of our country is slavery. And as horrible as we know it now, at one time it was the law of land. And then soon after it was replaced by Jim Crow laws. And then later on it's been replaced by things that aren't as explicit or aren't as clearly understood, but very oppressive as well. And those are things like redlining. Those are things like voter suppression. And these are things that continue to happen even today. And it's even easy to identify those things as systems of oppression. But I think the biggest system of oppression is, I'll identify myself as part of the problem. And that's because I carry biases, and without critically self-reflecting on what those biases are and how to move forward or handle them, or how to recognize what those systems of oppression are in my school site, I continue to contribute to the problem. So those are kind of the hidden things that keep the oppressive practices in place. They might not be the law of the land, but we all carry those biases, and then we all contribute to some extent to those systems of oppression. So I was raised to see everybody as equals. I was raised to see people of color as people. Now, what I didn't realize is that I was denying the idea that that privileges take place based on what we look like. And also what I was denying was that our cultures, our backgrounds are as diverse as we look. And so by not recognizing other people's cultures, I wouldn't recognize their values. And since I was raised in a system that was designed for me, I didn't think there was any other way. And so by replicating those systems that I was raised in, again, I'm just being complicit in continuing these oppressive practices. So it's time for us to take our blindfolds off. It's time for us to put a little different lens on. One that I enjoyed putting on was that of critical race theory. It's not something explicitly talked about in this book, but through some of the readings that Dr. Wright had us do, I was exposed to that, and I looked into that a little bit more, and I guess fascinated is the wrong word to use, but I was interested and intrigued, and it really helped me gain a different perspective and to be able to become a better leader at my school site. So one thing that I think is clear is, those in power don't like to give up power, and the easiest scapegoat here is Donald Trump. I know he says he's going to be winning so much that he's going to get tired of winning, but I personally believe that he's just afraid of losing, and we see that in the various protests that we've seen across the country during this challenging time with COVID-19, where we see predominantly white men showing up to protest armed, I guess exercising their Second Amendment right. So what you see is a bunch of white men afraid of losing something, whether it be their guns, whether it be their place or position in power. And we can think back to the recent protest where white men were chanting with tiki torches that Jews will not replace them, where in the recent news we see 3 white men chased down an African American because they suspected him of stealing. Chased him down and essentially lynched him, killed him, shot him. We see our most recent version of Barbecue Becky. We see what's become known as Karen, a gal walking with her dog in Central Park, feeling threatened by a black male who's a birder. He's in Central Park checking out birds, but she is so threatened by his presence, she calls 911 to say that her life is being threatened by an African American. So, anyways, we see these people in power afraid of something and afraid of losing power or feel threatened. And so disrupting the education system will not be easy. Betsy DeVos last year rolled back Obama-era protections that were put into place regarding school discipline for people of color, and she rolled those back this year. So again, people in power will not like to cede power. So it's going to take a lot of deep work from us, from future school leaders, to be willing to operate in the gray. Like I said, the law of the land used to be slavery. Zero tolerance policies in California are the law of the land. And what we see is we see the prison, school to prison pipeline is being populated by black and brown students. We are seeing black and brown students being disproportionately punished by these zero tolerance policies as well. So we really need to look at all of these systems that are in place and wonder what they're there for and how they help or hurt. So Khalifa talks about students' access to power should never be accessible only if they are asked to give up something that white students are allowed to keep. And this is his definition for identity confluence. I think it's a great topic in the book to discuss. And what it alludes to here is assimilation. And what we're asking people of color to do is to come into our school systems and then forget about their cultures, forget about the values that they have at home, and accept the Anglo-centric values of our school system. And so what we have are schools that operate as factories to produce a white culture, an Anglo-centric culture. And what we're denying, again, are the students' values that they have at home. What we're denying are the cultural differences. We're just imposing on them the Anglo-centric culture. So, it's come to view assimilate as not just a bad word, but a violent word, because you are asking someone to become somebody who they are not. You are stripping them away of who they are. You are taking away their culture from them. So hopefully we can look at schools not as a place to create white students, right, or white culture, but a place that recognizes and values the cultures of everyone. Be a place, a community center, not just a place that is forming more of the same. So I mentioned identity confluence when we were talking about Khalifa's statement, and I think he recommends in his book some ways to help with this. And some of those key points are: 1, understanding your own history and epistemology's bias, preventing fears, feelings, disagreements, and emotion from arresting the work that you are doing. Distinguish between identity and behavior. Humanize minoritized identities. And learning the funds of knowledge. from our minoritized students. And I think this is such a powerful idea, is funds of knowledge, and what is that? And it's basically making sure that we are recognizing that our kids have stuff to bring to the table. Making sure that we don't have to make our classrooms look like the classrooms that were in schoolhouses in the 18th and 19th centuries. But we can recognize some of the important ancestral ways of learning. Utilizing circles is just a basic example. When we're looking at the individual versus their behavior, making sure that we are not punishing somebody for who they are, but we are being accepting of who they are, and not imposing more Anglo-centric rule of law upon them if who they are doesn't fit our view of the world order. So, as I discussed, lastly, funds of knowledge. Making sure that we are valuing what people bring to the table. Student voice is a simple thing to make sure that our students are heard. Making your course relevant and creative to the lives of the students, versus just taking a curriculum that was designed maybe in Texas. The textbook that you have may be designed in Texas by by leaders who are white. It's fun to do a comparisons of textbooks that are produced for Texas and then textbooks that are produced for California, and to see the differences in some of the topics that are discussed in there. So get out of the textbook and then get into the students, meaning recognize what they have to bring to the table. Well, this was really deep work. This was a lot of the wrong word is to say fun, but it was very fascinating. It was a difficult process to go through, but I think it was very rewarding in the sense that now I know that how I can serve my students better. I know how I can potentially make changes at my school sites, and have I guess the word I'm looking for is inspiring. This course was incredibly inspiring. Gave me the will to want to go back to make changes at my school site. I felt empowered to be able to do so, and so with that, I hope you took something from this. I hope it spurs some kind of discussion. I hope I said something that was irritating to you, and I hope you can stew on it, and I hope we can talk about it at some point, because that's the idea, is to kind of disrupt the norm and to get everybody to a different place, so we have less bias, negative bias, because we're always going to have bias, but negative bias, and recognize when we do have that bias, how to handle it and what we can do with it. All right, with that, our motto at E3 is take care of you, take care of each other, and take care of E3, or in this case, EDL 640. Have a great day.